Hello and welcome to another episode of Conscious Living, uh, where we typically air every Wednesday at 6 p.m. on 100.5 FM CFRO in Vancouver. Another spirit plant medicine program today. My name is Marc Caron, and I'm happy to introduce my co-host and partner in the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, Mr. Stephen Gray, as we get ready to speak with a few of our presenters in a pre-conference conversation talking about psychedelics and their impact for humanity. So, Stephen, always a pleasure. It seems like we just did this yesterday.
What a surprise. And and thank you for not calling me your partner in crime. Yeah.
Well, we're not in crime, man. We're a partner in consciousness and, helping humanity do whatever we can to do to make a better world for each and every one of us.
Humbly, of course. Yeah.
Well, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. I want to welcome our three guests, Mary Sanders, Sui Kene, and Anya Luizaga Velder. I'm going to read parts of their bios from our website. So if you want to know more, go and look at our presenter page at spiritplantmedicine.com. Excuse me. So here we go. I'm going to start with Mary. Mary Saunders, LCSW, is a dynamic psychotherapist and fervent social justice advocate, With over a decade of experience in community mental health, she's provided transformative psychotherapy and clinical case management to BIPOC, LGBTQIA2S+, veterans, immigrants, refugees, foster youth, and families grappling with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, developmental trauma, and various forms of oppression. Trained in psychedelic-assisted therapy at CIIS, CPTR, MAPS, and the Ketamine Training Center, Mary is also equipped with certifications in trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems. She's a founding member of the People of Color Psychedelic Collective, championing exclusivity and accessibility in healing spaces. Very impressive, obviously. Since 2012, Uike has apprenticed under Peruvian indigenous shamans in the Shipibo tradition and is currently a student of Ricardo Amaringo at Niue Rao Centro Espiritual. That's in Peru. He's been running Shipibo plant medicine retreats since 2014. Excuse me. He also works as a transformational coach. Hang on a second, folks. And runs men's retreats. Suikene writes and speaks on many topics, including masculinity, race, and plant medicine. He is in the early stages of opening a BIPOC-centered plant medicine retreat in Mexico. Dr. Anya Loizaga Velder is a German-Mexican clinical psychologist whose research into the therapeutic potential of ritual psychedelic plant use spans more than 2 decades. She serves as Director of Research and Psychotherapy at Nyarika Institute for Agricultural Medicine and is currently collaborating on the Ayahuasca Treatment Outcome Project, which aims to validate the effectiveness of ayahuasca and traditional Amazonian medicine for the treatment of addiction. Loizaga Velder is also an adjunct professor of humanities and health at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, where she works to implement clinical research in evaluating the therapeutic efficacy of sacred plants in intercultural therapeutic settings. Her work aims to preserve and amplify the wisdom of pre-colonial Amazonian and Mesoamerican traditions while cultivating a respectful and productive dialogue between Western medicine and indigenous healers. So, to those of you watching this live and anyone who will watch or listen to this after the fact, I just want to say we are honored to have these people with us. As you can tell from these biographies, they're leaders in their fields and fabulous spokespeople for plant medicines and the larger issues around consciousness transformation for a planet in deep doo-doo, pardon my French. So we are going to do it like this. We're going to ask a question. I am going to ask a question, one question, the same question to each of the three in turn, and give them 5 minutes to answer it. That'll be section 1 of this this webinar. Section 2 of 3 will be a free-form discussion amongst the 3 of them, with occasional commentary and questions from Marc and I. That should take about 15 minutes, and then in the final section, if those of you in the live audience have questions, that will be your opportunity to directly address the 3 guests. Failing that, or when that ends, we will turn it back to them for another summation. So that whole last section will last about 15 minutes, and away we go. So I'm going to start with Anya. So Anya, the question is, again, based on your experience, knowledge, insight, etc., how do you see the role of psychedelics / plant medicines in culture and society at this particular time, this particular what you might call nexus point in human history, where we appear to be on the cusp of some rapid changes and upheavals? And as I've said before, please take this question anywhere you want to go that has even glancing relevance to the way I put the question. Please proceed, Anya.
Yeah, thank you for this question, Stephen, and hello everybody listening to this meeting here. I see a great opportunity for plant medicines and psychedelics regaining a path where they can contribute to the evolution of consciousness on this planet and contribute to the healing of many of those mental health challenges that are so present in those times. I believe there's a huge opportunity of finding treatments for people who have not found a resolution of their mental health issues with conventional forms of treatment, such as difficult grief, for instance, or complex trauma, substance abuse, eating disorders, depression. There's many indications where plant medicines and psychedelics seem quite promising, including also neurological issues such as long COVID and the anxiety and the depression associated with long COVID, some long COVID syndromes, or the regaining of neurological capacities after an accident. In this possibility that psychedelics have shown of re-induced neurological connections and broaden our cognitive capacities, our emotional capacities, and also our capacities to connect with the mysterious realm of our consciousness, what connects us with the most essential parts that we have as human communities. And I think there's a huge opportunities here also to reconnect to indigenous wisdom traditions. That was something quite overlooked in the first wave of psychedelic scientific explorations, to really honor and understand the deep wisdom of the traditions that are there, that go much beyond the pharmacological knowledge, the very elaborate technologies that are held in indigenous plant medicines, that have been evolved together with plant medicines and help to guide the non-ordinary states of consciousness, make it deeper, contain it, and bring more meaning to it in this way. So I think there's a whole wealth of knowledge that is still out there in a respectful dialogue in between indigenous medicine traditions and modern approaches to psychedelic medicine in this way. And lots of bridge building opportunities there, also in terms of not continuing a colonialistic science that is exploitative and just tries to see what can I learn from indigenous people, but rather approaches this dialogue there with a perspective of what can I give back to indigenous people who have stewarded those practices throughout centuries, putting their life in danger so that we now have the benefits as Western cultures or non-Indigenous cultures for our mental health, for our health as a society as well. So I think there's this important challenges of reciprocity that needs to be questioned and on a deeper level in there, and applied action of how benefit is shared and how minorities are also included in the benefit of those practices in there. And those medicines traditionally were not used for commercial reasons. So I'm kind of worried about this commercial boom that is around the psychedelic use, and also the big hype. I find this can be quite complicated, right? To put such a sacred medicine on Vogue front page and a newspaper front page. Those medicines have been hidden for so many centuries and safeguarded in this way. So there's a huge opportunities now having them on the spotlight again for all their potentials they hold. But there is a huge responsibility which comes with there too, how to steer this in a way that really honors the cultures they come from, sustains the cultures they come from, and also sustains the sacred, which is their true essence. And now I'll leave it here just to pass over the ball to wonderful colleagues I'm sharing the call with.
Yeah, that was great material. Thank you very much, Anya. Perhaps during our second section, you might go into a little more detail on some of those issues, but we'll deal with that when we come to it. So let's go to Suikina at this point, and I'll repeat the question. Essentially, based on your own experience, knowledge, study, practice, etc., what is it that you see as the role of psychedelics/plant medicines for the world, for the cultures, and in particular at this time of great change and upheaval?
Thank you. I think what's more interesting to me actually is really looking further into the future. At this time in the world that we live in, that our children are going to live in, there's obviously a lot of people with a lot of trauma and a lot of healing that is possible. I mean, that's my life. That's what I do for a living, and I think it's a great thing to do. But what's more interesting to me is to think about like where we're really going with this, and my relationship with psychedelics and plant medicine has changed a great deal. I was a kid partying, and now I'm like sort of a man of the cloth almost, and accordingly, my perspective on what's possible with these things has changed a great deal. And what I've really come to is that it's not about getting high. It's not even really about healing. It's really about us coming, or more substantively, it's about us coming into harmony with ourselves and into harmony with nature. And again, in a broader perspective, to me, it makes sense to look at the current era of humanity, say, last 5 or 10,000 years since agriculture was invented, as adolescence. Like childhood kind of works, adulthood kind of works, adolescence does not work. Hunter-gatherer times worked. Since agriculture, there's been a lot of hierarchy, there's been a lot of war. It's been a mess. It's been an absolute mess. And I mean, I don't think the mushrooms are going to tell us to go back to living in caves, but I do think that plants, much more so than psychedelics per se, I think that plants are going to teach us to live in harmony with ourselves, to live in harmony with one another, to live in harmony with nature. And obviously, there's a great deal of healing involved in this. And then really coming into a true connection with ourselves, a true connection with nature, a clear connection with the divine, and That's where I really think we're going. And I do not have a blueprint for this. You know, I'm just one guy running some retreats and helping half a dozen people to heal at a time. But yeah, when I think about what we're really doing, what the plants have to offer us, what our relationship with them really at its highest is, yeah, it's this coming into center, coming into harmony. And you know, it's interesting. I spent a lot of time in the jungle dieting plants, you know, learning from the plants. And a friend of mine pointed out something to me. He's like, we're dieting the plants, learning about them. They're dieting us. You know, the plants in the Amazon, they know about Shibibos, you know, the people that I study with, like and then we're this whole other thing and this whole other set of problems. And to me, this kind of connects to, like, in a way, the Shibibos, they're living in a more, they were, in a more hunter-gatherer way, like way that made that there was a sense to it. And now we come in with this more complex culture and this whole other set of problems, and the plants are like, oh, okay. They're dieting us so they can help us figure out how we can live in a more harmonious way. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. Mary, have you got that question locked in now, or would you like? Actually, maybe I'll repeat it just because we had one or two people come into the room live in a moment, or in the last few moments. So, the question again, if you've just joined us, that we've been asking to each of the three guests on our panel here, Dr. Anya Luizaga Velder and Sui Kene, and now Mary Saunders, is that excuse me, is basically like this. Based on your own knowledge, experience, wisdom, insight, etc., how do you see the role of these psychedelics/plant medicines for the culture, for society, and particularly at this time of great change and upheaval? Take it away, please, Mary.
Great. Thank you so much for having me and sharing this space with such richness and experience here on the panel. My name is Mary Sanders, and I'm calling from or zooming from Ohlone Uchichen land, and my pronouns are she, her. And, you know, why I, moved towards this work was initially around having more paths to support my clients who were healing from complex PTSD, and most of my clients at the time were refugees and immigrants from Syria and Iraq, and just seeing the devastation of war trauma and really acknowledging my own inability to be of best service, to really see, what were these possibilities to heal. And in that process of learning about these medicines, I also began to develop my own relationship to ayahuasca and mushrooms. And I speak today holding, just acknowledging my own privilege to speak about these medicines here, residing in Oakland, California, where it is decriminalized. And it's really a privilege to be able to take these medicines or to travel to the jungle to experience these diets. And so what I'm really interested is around the ways in which we can have conversations around accessibility, around doing this deeper work that requires, right, a lot of time and resources. And I know for myself and in my own healing, right, like most people, right, is we're working with this onion of many, many layers. And as I've gotten deeper in the layers, I realize, some of the work that I'm doing is so connected to this ancestral work that's related to multiple autoimmune disorders that I experience. And so I'm very interested in this work around the ways in which not only are we healing and, as beautifully put, moving into this harmony, but how we can really deeply connect to our ancestors, deeply connect to what is still stored in our bodies and what we are navigating with so many Black folks of these musculoskeletal disorders and the many of struggles that we're carrying in our bodies. And so not only is my interest in this healing work, but what is it like when we work as a collective and we come together? I often sit in a Black medicine community, and we collectively work together and we mirror each other and hold space for each other for this healing, but also to disrupt this generational trauma and use this healing as a path to build collective power towards resistance. And so I imagine this for folks, navigating multiple marginalized identities. And another piece that's been really, as just mentioned, is really important to me is, the ways in which that we can connect to our spirit, connect to the spirits of the plants, of the earth, of the elements, and the ways that when we connect to the spirit of these plants and of the earth, is also a path to really sever our ties to white supremacy, to patriarchy, to capitalism that is so embedded in our systems, but also, I think, a path of reclamation of our traditional ways. And thinking about, my ancestors and their connection to plants, and thinking about not only on this land here, but the land in West Africa, and also in Switzerland, where my other relatives are from. And so I think that, so much of this work can be an opportunity to connect to the earth and to connect to the ways that we want to care for the earth. Today I'm sitting in record-breaking weather in Oakland, sweating. There's no AC. And so we see this climate, we see what's happening in Tennessee and South Carolina. There's such urgency. And so what a beautiful way, I think, for us to reclaim our connection to the earth and to the elements. And so, there's so much humanity can gain, but I'll just leave it there. Thank you so much.
Sure. Well, thank you to all three of you for that. I think you unearthed a wealth of material there, and I know I certainly have some questions, and I imagine Marc might as well. But before that, I would like to offer any of the three of you to either follow up on any remarks that you or the other two made, or ask each other questions. So just, kind of raise your hand and wave, and we'll turn the mic, as it were, the talking stick, over to you. So do any of the three of you have anything that you want to follow up with now?
I just wanted to add something that I consider very important, as plant medicines and psychedelics connect us to our true essence, and also with the essence of life and the interconnectedness of life. I wanted to mention also how important it is to support the sustainability of the plant medicines. And I think that that's one of the challenges also, that there might be, through the hype of their therapeutic benefits, sometimes an over exploitations of those very medicines that might bring those therapeutic benefits. And as humankind, we have so much to learn of a good balance, a good reciprocity, which is something that is very deep rooted in indigenous cultures. They would never overharvest. But now there is an overharvest taking place of ayahuasca wine, for instance. And as we speak, the Amazon is in flames. There's devastating fires. And so much ayahuasca that has been planted there is being destroyed by the fires that we humans have caused by climate change that is affecting all countries and all regions of this planet in a different way. So just something I wanted to mention, because I do think that that's important. It's not only about psychedelic, about manifesting our mind and our well-being as humans, but indigenous people refer to those medicines as sacraments that connect to the very essence of life itself. And I think we are in a time as a planet where we need to ask us those very questions. Where are we heading towards? for the future generations. What is the kind of planet we want to leave our kids and our grandkids and all the generations to come?
Yeah, thank you. So, Kenny, do you have any follow-up questions on what Anya said or anything else that's come up in the last 10 minutes or so?
Nothing comes to mind at the time.
Sure. Well, Anya, I'd like to actually ask you if there are that you're aware of either the work that you are doing or other people you were around or that you were aware of, specifically, other than the obvious, change of attitude required for sustainability. Are there any initiatives that are underway or that are being proposed for actually on the ground how to develop sustainability for these substances?
Well, there are several NGOs that are doing very well reflected efforts, such, for instance, as the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund and other Indigenous reciprocities initiative. All the work that the Caron is doing, for instance. And then many Indigenous NGOs that are at the same time promoting their plant medicine are also promoting sustainable management of those medicines, preserving them for all the future generations. And yeah, there are efforts in place, and there's still a lot to be done, and still a lot to be put into this field.
Mm-hmm. Well, so Kenny, although you didn't have any direct comment just a moment ago, you are around a world where ayahuasca is needed and used a lot. What are you seeing in terms of its how the plant or the plants themselves are doing?
Well, I should say I have a fairly limited perception on what's going on. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Iquitos, I spent a lot of time in the jungle, and what I see is that ayahuasca vine costs about twice as much as it did like 7 or 8 years ago. But it grows quickly, and people are planting it. And I haven't looked into it thoroughly, but I do not see it as a problem. This guy, Chris Killam, he wrote an article about it, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and he went and talked to a bunch of people, and they're like, yeah, we're basically just planting more ayahuasca. And I know there was it was an organization, I won't mention the name of it, they about 10 years ago were like basically trying to create this idea that there was great scarcity around ayahuasca, like basically to get themselves funding. It was really ridiculous. And so to be clear, like I'm not up on it at all, but from what I see in the jungle, it's pretty straightforward economics. People pay for vine, other people plant vine. Conversely, iboga is a little more complex, and peyote is definitely much more of an issue. I mean, I know very little about that world, but I know that peyote grows very slowly, and there are serious conservation issues with that.
Oh, yeah.
But again, from my not particularly broadly informed like man on the street perspective in Iquitos, yeah, I mean we're not running out of ayahuasca vine. And Chacruna grows a year or two, yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Marc, do you have any questions for any of the panelists?
Can I add something?
Oh, yes, of course.
My
Go for it.
question was for Mary. If
Hang on.
she could
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to add, just like the importance that's being highlighted is not only about these medicines, but the context of these medicines, right? So we talk about what we just mentioned, that you don't take more than you need, right? And there's a lot of conscious awareness about what's growing and your relationship with these plants. And I think this is a really important piece, is the knowledge and the wisdom around these plants, because the society that most of us have been conditioned in is capitalism, right? It's about extraction and commodification. And so highlighting the importance of this knowledge, of understanding, of taking our time, slowing down, getting to know the plants, bringing this conscious awareness, how we're utilizing and where they're coming from, is a much different approach, right? I buy something at the store and it's in my refrigerator and then I eat it without the thought of like, where did it come from? Whose hands did it touch? How much labor did it take? And so much of us are conditioned in that way. And so when I think about, what is my resistance, these small ways of resistance to capitalism, colonization, or white supremacy, is like, can I do these, sort to integrate these practices so that I'm not erasing all the layers that came before this plant came into my hands. And just thinking about it, in simple ways is like, can we start even growing some of our own herbs, right? And start connecting to the earth, and instead of going to the market, can we start sharing with our neighbors? And just kind of inviting these ways of being into our daily lives, that we're not waiting for ceremony to have these relationships, but we're building them every day. And so I just really want to highlight what you were saying, Zanja, just like really bringing that into our lives and really reclaiming these traditional ways that all of us have connection to.
Thank you. Marc, did you have a different question for Mary also?
Well, my question.
I'd say so. Yeah, I mean, it's like when you isolate the question of the supply of the plants from like the larger thing, it's a very different question. I think that really is the truth, is that like the reciprocity and the awareness of where things come from and what people, what these cultures have to teach us. And it is, I mean, especially like with, chemical psychedelics, it's very easy for people to end this very transactional, and it's, I mean, I look back, I was a very transactional person when I was a tripper, when I was younger, and yeah, like this is something like the greater wisdom of how to be, and again, start getting high, that's great, start healing, that's better, but then just like the entire life, and just as Mary is saying, like living in harmony and respect and appreciation for ourselves and for everything around, for everyone and everything around us.
Nice. Anyone?
Yeah, I just wanted to add with regards to sustainability and conservation, a real issue we have here in Mexico is the exploitation of the Bufo alvarius. Because this poor reptile is often being tortured in order to obtain the psychedelic and the extract from the glands that are have a psychedelic effect when you smoke them. And sometimes people torture the poor toads in a way that they don't survive the torture. So sometimes people are not aware, like that their mystical experience is not always backed up in good manufacturing practices in this way. So very important to know, where's your medicine coming from? Who has harvested the medicine? Who has grown it? And in which way is it harvested? Of course, there's some regeneration efforts. There's farms now for the toad regeneration where they are also harvested in a respectful way. So, but I think this is something that is common for all medicine, that we need to ask ourselves more, what is the source of the medicine? And is it a respectful source, a sustainable source?
Yeah, very important. Thanks very much for sharing that. And I'm trying to keep myself out of this because we're mostly interested in hearing from you folks. But I do want to just briefly mention, to confirm in this area, what Soikene mentioned about peyote, because until a couple of the key players passed away, I was very involved with the Native American Church and their peyote prayer ceremonies. And so I've learned a little bit about that plant, that cactus. And it's one of the things I learned from the researchers actually is that it's called a keystone species, and a keystone species is a plant or substance that's essential to the culture of those people. So there's something unique about the Native American experience combined with the scarcity of this plant that I just want to put in this word that particular cactus needs to be protected in an extremely serious or high level way, so to speak. Yeah. Anything else? Marc? More questions?
Well, there's a lot to work with there. I certainly have a number of questions, but first I just want to thank you all for what you've already shared today, because you touched on a lot of great key points that I think are important for people to contemplate and consider in using these medicines. And from peyote to sustainability to for all plants, I think is really important. Now, with that being said, we've talked about a number of different medicines, and we also hear that not, all medicines are for everyone. And how does one really discern if they're feeling the call? What would you recommend or suggest to them in regards to how do you choose what medicine to work with?
I don't think any of us said not all medicines are for everyone.
No, not necessarily in your conversation, but it's come up in many, and people do ask me that, and I'm not a medicine man of that nature, so I'm just curious. If somebody was curious and looking because they haven't been looking at any, or they're looking for solutions to enhance their lives or overcome something, how would they navigate this, wide range of, options in terms of the plant medicine psychedelic field?
I don't think there's an easy solution for that. I think like in some perfect world, there would be some like meta healer or like, I don't know, like healer oracle broker who you'd be like, this is my problem. This is the modality. I mean, I think about this with physical ailments as well. And that absolutely does not exist. And I think people should really trust their intuition. I think that people should do research. People should ask their friends. A lot of information online about ayahuasca, I know, is totally bananas. So like research is of questionable utility. And so yeah, intuition and friends. But I'll tell you something. A friend of mine, Carlos, he started the place where I first trained, and we were talking about some centers that were not doing good work, and bad medicine is bad. It's super bad. And he said something interesting, which always stuck with me, which is that people get the medicine that they're ready for, you know? And I wouldn't let anybody drink where I drank for the first 2 years. They were not good places.
Hmm.
And that's what my level of consciousness was at that time, you know? And so I feel like we get what we're ready for. And so to get back to the essence of what I understood your question to be, I mean, figure it out. But yeah, I think we're gonna get what we need. And again, looking back on my path, like I successfully went to better and better places and found deeper and deeper healing. And I think that's going to be most people's path, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mary or Anya, do you have a comment about that question?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that medicines are not only healing; they could also be harming, depending on who takes them and in which context and with which intention and which accompaniment. So I do believe it's very important also to assess, are there any counterindications?
Such as?
Counterindications or psychiatric, such as predisposition to a bipolar disorder or a psychosis. Are there any spiritual counterindications or physical counterindications? Like you don't want to take a plant that makes you vomit, when you have a gastrointestinal lesion, or if you have a cardiovascular problem, a previous stroke. So those medicines are not always healing, and it depends also on the skill of the practitioner to hold a space for a person like with a serious trauma. You don't want to be in an uncontained huge ayahuasca ceremony. You might get re-traumatized, right? And the ayahuasca ceremony could also heal the trauma if it's well contained. So it really, it's not so much which plant or which psychedelic to use, but also what is the knowledge, the depths of healing capacities of the person who holds the space for you, accompanies you through. And do you have the time also afterwards to integrate such an experience? I think timing is of essence. You don't want to have this transformative experience just before a really stressy work week. Like I do think like taking plant medicines or psychedelic is like fasting. You need some time to come back and integrate all this inner shift of consciousness. This is deep work, right? And in timing also, are you really ready for this work? And do you have the time to prepare? So many questions there to ask.
Yeah. I think we've all, well, certainly I have learned, from my mistakes of just diving back into a busy life again, and then a week later it's like, well, what happened? Did anything happen that's been of durable value? So, Mary, what would you say from your experience are the qualities that are absolutely essential for a person who's going to be in the kind of role that Anya was just talking about, whether it's an ayahuasca ceremonial leader, therapist, or a mushroom ceremonial leader, or whatever?
Yeah, so firstly, I'll just kind of add to that last question about taking your time with that inquiry, and to connect to our intuition, we need some spaciousness and time to, settle down, some quiet time, so that we can really connect to our own, right, our inner wisdom. And that's the same as we connect with practitioners or healers or different communities, is really tuning into our own intuition. So while someone may have these incredible qualities and maybe have lots of experience, but if we're checking in with ourselves, and that person was an amazing healer for another person, that might not be the person that's good for us. And that might be for various reasons. Maybe it's just an energetic thing. You just have a sensation about it. Or maybe it's other layers. We're working with racial trauma and we want someone that has a similar lived experience, or we're working on exploring our gender or sexual identity, and we're seeking for someone that we have a lot of trust that can really hold those layers. And so those are areas of just like curiosity. But I think with any, a healer, as myself as a therapist, the qualities that I think are really important is really tuning into my clients, moving at their pace, really working with consent. And a lot of my somatic practices is consent. It's okay if I move on to the next theme or question, and really using this as to build this trust. And really building that trust by this connection, and allowing things to move at the pace that they need to move. And so sometimes, we may not have that spaciousness, and we really jump into these decisions. And so, I just really encourage people to slow down. Some really important qualities to know or to understand, to inquire about, is if you're going to a center or working with healers, to learn about their training and how long their center's been around. I think it was mentioned earlier, inquiring and learning more about the folks that you anticipate to work with. So I'll just pause there. I kind of answered a little bit of both questions. I hope that's okay.
That's fine, yeah. So I see that we've had 2 or 3 people join us in the last 5 minutes, and for those people, I just want to say that since the top of the hour, in real time here, we have Marc Caron and myself, Stephen Gray from Spirit Plant Medicine and Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, have been engaged or giving a platform for Dr. Anya Loizaga Velder, Sui Kene, and Mary Saunders to talk about these medicines. And if you have just joined us, you are just beginning to find out how extensive and deep their knowledge is. So it's been a remarkable day so far. And Marc, I'm wondering if it's time to open it up for questions at this point.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about the question that Anya.
Go for it.
Yeah. What was I say? I mean, one thing that I always say to people is you're thinking about working with some of them, ask them where they trained. And if they do not, especially with the Amazonian medicine, look you in the eye and rattle off a bunch of things or people that you've never heard of, or even if you have heard of them. But what I'm saying is if they're not clear, like I trained here, like done. Like somebody sent me, they're like, this person, they're like, they trained here, and then they're like, our plants are the greatest teachers. Burn their phone number. Amazonian medicine is a tradition. And I mean, also, Western psychological stuff, Peter Levine, like it's like these are traditions in a slightly different sense. So yeah, like that is one of the main things I tell people. Look them in the eye, be like, where did you train? And if they aren't clear when they respond, you don't have anything to do with them. And then I guess this just connects to what I think both of you were saying is that it's not about the substance. It's not about the plant. It's much more about the practitioner and the relationship that they have. And there's very poorly trained people working with very powerful substances. That does not work well, and there's very well trained people giving people microdoses of mushrooms, and that works very well. And one thing that just makes me nuts is when people are like, this plant, this pill, this medicine, that's just it's just a catalyst to the greater healing process. And that healing process is only going to work to the extent of the ability of the person. And as Mary says, like the connection and sense of safety that you have to. So that was what I want to say.
Yeah. Anya or Mary, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd love to add also, I think we mentioned about how deep importantly it is that a person has the skill, the knowledge, and the experience also to hold the space. But I think it's also important to have somebody who has the spiritual maturity, the personal maturity, and the ethical maturity to hold space, because participants can get so vulnerable under the influence of psychedelics or plant medicines, and it might make them vulnerable to abuse by a practitioner who does not have a really strong ethical grounding and a continued personal work, which I do find is a very important ingredient for a good practitioner, somebody who continuously reflects on themselves and works on themselves and embraces their shadow, knows their shadow.
What Anya said. Totally.
Yeah. Sui Kene, do you continue to, in a sense, learn from, train under your maestro or mentor?
Yeah. I spent like 5 months in Peru this year or something like that. Yeah, I mean that is all the difference. Like, and like if you don't have a person, then like what's going on, And it was interesting what you're saying about the maturity. I have some friends who finished training, and like the training we're training it's a lot, and they're good practitioners, but they're not really adult enough yet, and like they're not working. It's not like but like it's like this one friend in particular. I'm like, he's like, Corey, you need to go do this diet, and I'm like, you need to just go like live in regular life, and yeah, and that's that's what's happening for sure. But yeah, yeah, the sort of wisdom and surety, like that just gives you a broader foundation from which to do the work. And yeah, I've definitely like with the ethics. Yeah, I mean, a lot can go wrong. A lot can go wrong. And yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
people just, yeah, it's hard to overstate how vulnerable people are and how potentially confusing things are. You know, how people can think that something that happened in the past is happening now. People in the now can think this is this special situation in which the rules of reality don't apply. It's yeah, I mean, there's two reasons I train with my teacher. One is he is a phenomenal shaman, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is that his ethics are on point. His integrity is on point, and that is a more difficult thing to find, you know, so
Well, I hope a lot of people get to see this webinar, Mark, because this is wonderful, practical, usable, user-friendly, as it were, guidance from the three of you. What do you think, folks? Shall we open it up to some questions? Everybody
Yeah, I
up for
put it
that?
out there in the chat, and I have any hand come for on, but if anybody out there in our studio audience, where we've got about 11 folks out there, if
There's one.
oh, Michael has a question. All right, Michael, you can
Is that
pop me out and bring yourself in, Michael.
our own Michael?
Our own Michael, yes.
Our
Good.
our own Michael. I had a question for you, Anya. You were talking about reciprocity early on in terms of giving back to indigenous people. And what I heard you say is that from a Western culture, we seem to extract their wisdom. And so somebody that has a deep understanding, or deep understanding but who understands the importance of indigenous wisdom in this time of global transformation, what is the best way, in your opinion, to give back to indigenous peoples? What is it? What is that single most, or maybe there's a few things. What is it? Is it sharing their knowledge? Is it respect? Is it connection? Is it relationship? Is it monetary exchange? Is it, what can people do to support indigenous peoples in the best possible way, period?
I think there is not one best way, and I think there's several best way. And indigenous people can give the best answer to this. I consider myself here more as a bridge, maybe voicing some of the reflections that my indigenous friends have voiced. One was that it seems like absurd that the Western culture seems to have forgotten that all the psilocybin that is traded in North America actually is only in our consciousness because the indigenous people of Mexico have safeguarded against the slaughtering Inquisition this wisdom, and then we're so generous to share it with a non-indigenous person to bring it back. So the Mazatecs and many other indigenous tribes of Mexico live in harsh poverty. Sometimes they don't have water infrastructure. They lack a culturally adapted path of education where their culture is also taught in schools in their own language. They lack the resources oftentimes for serious medical issues that they cannot treat with their indigenous medicine and need to go to the hospital. So it's kind of saddening that there is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the West about investments on psilocybin, but there is very little percentage of companies that seriously are committed to say, okay, we're gonna give a percentage of our income we do with this medicine back to indigenous people and see what they need in terms of health, and in terms of supporting the cultural survival, in terms of good food for their people, so many things. And I think everybody has their own gift where they can give back. And what we do, for instance, as NGO, as we are psychologists, we have been approached by indigenous people who say our jewels are being taken away, the jewels of our culture, which is our youth, because they are taking methamphetamines, they're taking solvents, their brains are burning. Like, how will our culture survive if our youth succumbs to drugs? So what we are doing as an NGO is supporting indigenous-led initiatives for cultural integrative addiction treatment programs and trauma treatment programs, which have a cultural sensitive approach to treatment. But that's what we do because we are psychologists. And I think everybody from their own profession, from their own skill of knowledge, from their own indigenous relations they have, can support in a different way. So just putting some ideas about it here.
Thank you for that. And thank you for your work that you're doing, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in this panel. It's been extremely educational, and thank you for who you are and how you show up in the world.
So, to our other two panelists, do you have any comments or things you want to add to what Anya has just been talking about? No?
I can just add.
Go ahead.
Kind of how, just some of my personal practices. One being, I've been able to diet with the Shipibo people a couple of times, and so having the connections of different folks in the community, and when there has been folks, experiencing a medical crisis or a fundraiser for the land or a fundraiser for a school nearby, my practice has been always to, give whatever I can in that moment, but really just maintaining and nourishing those relationships where we can. And so while, you may not have those relationships built, I think it's great to do your research on which organizations are available. And at the same time, I think it's really important to be aware of the indigenous people of the land where you live. So here in Lonely Land, there's an amazing organization, it's a great land trust. And so participating in action, showing up when I can, and being available to pay my Shumi tax, but also what are the ways in which I can learn how to use the support of the land so that I'm, I'm moving a little more in alignment. So whenever I'm taking something, I'm taking, just a little bit, I'm offering something back. Maybe it's tobacco, maybe it's a prayer or a song, but I bring that forward as like this, it's a practice. I'm inviting a practice. And so I'm trying to move away from the ways in which I have learned to just take. This is mine. No, actually, we are in relationship. And so I just bring that as ways in which that we can start to think about and really embody these practices, develop these relationships, and do our own research and identify maybe some of the organizations that I mentioned earlier as well.
Excellent, thank you. Hey, so Kene, we've been talking about ethics and training and so on, and obviously you've done a lot of training yourself. And one of my kind of I don't know what you'd call it, like a pet passion, is regarding the Icaros. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of what's all going on and what's behind those. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role of the Icaros and how someone needs to learn those, etc.
Well, I can talk about how we do it in the lineage that I study in. I don't know what other people do, but you don't learn Icaros. You do not learn Icaros. You learn Shipibo, which is a mind-bending language. And then you diet. You do plant diets, which is a whole thing that for this conversation, I would just say is a way to connect and learn things from the plants. And the plants give you melodies. And then you start to hum the melody, and then you start to sing the melody, and then you plug the words into the melodies. And they are not songs as such, in the way like Happy Birthday is a song. Like the melody is a structure. It's a variable structure that you plug in what you need to say. So it's like it's freestyle, and somebody sits down in front of you and you're like, oh, I need to clean X, Y, and Z off of them. I would clean X, Y, and Z off of them. And so you just kind of do it, you do it as you're going. And sometimes it's kind of like, oh, making an omelet, it's basically an omelet is an omelet. Like you don't have a recipe, but you've done it before. A lot of traumas, when you really get down to their essence, they're a lot more similar than a lot of people realize. Abandonment, abuse, fear, grief. Like when you really boil it down, things are kind of similar. So like, oh, it's an omelet, but every omelet has variations, So yeah, that's what it is. You connect with the plants. The plants give you a melody, and then you learn Shipibo, and then you sit down. Someone sits down in front of you in ceremony, and you see what you need to sing to. And really the art of it, a lot of the beauty of it is, especially for a person like myself who has such a firmly put together sense of self, is to let go of the self, letting the spirit of the plant move through you, and being not a passenger, but,
Channel, kind of.
a thing. Yeah, channel. People often use this phrase, a hollow bone. I thought of this thing once. I was the least likely person to be doing this kind of work. I had all the wrong perspectives in the beginning, and I really did not like this phrase, working with plants. I just didn't like the phrase. And I was like, I don't know, you work with the computer. I just didn't like it. And then I was like, no, we are working with the plants, so we really are. And then I was like, but you're not working with the plants like you work with a computer or you work with a shovel. Like you're actually collaborating with the plants. And then a couple years go by, I'm very slow. A couple years go by, I'm like, and I am the junior collaborator.
Yeah, good one. What about
and
the
that's what I'm saying, like getting out of the way, so the spirit and the wisdom of the plants can move through you. And it's very striking to me. Sometimes when I'm cleaning a very heavy energy, my voice will just change. Like I didn't sign up. It gets higher and tighter and just like, because it's got some very serious thing to do. And I'm like, I didn't press the button, this happened. And yeah, that's as you're saying, the channel, the hollow bone, the getting out of the way to allow it to come through you.
Beautiful, yeah. What about the Mapacho tobacco? What does it do?
What does the Mapacho tobacco do? People say that Mapacho is the gateway to the world of plant spirits. And so people have tobacco, I'm not having tobacco in reach, but you often see somebody like blow into the tobacco before they smoke it. And it's to communicate with the tobacco. You're like, hey, tobacco, this is what's going on. So I have to say, can you help me say this to the world of plant spirits? Can you help me say this to the ayahuasca? Can you help me say this to the plant that I'm dieting? And so that's one of the principal things, is it being a gateway. And then another thing is it's very grounding and very clearing. I did just this weekend, I did a little retreat for a friend of mine, and he's like, the energy, it's kind of crazy. And he's like, can you sing a clearing song to clear the room? It wasn't time to sing that song. I have kind of a schedule. And I go over and I blow some of the smoke on him, and then everything just kind of wafts off of him, and that wasn't a particularly heavy energy, so that was easily addressed with just tobacco. But so yeah, that's another big purpose of it. And it's also going to be very grounding, it can be very grounding. And it has nicotine in it, like it chills you out, if you just want to kind of get like neuropharmacological about it. But yeah, those are the main things: the connection with the world of plant spirits, the clearing, and the grounding. And people generally experience Mapacho as a very masculine energy. So it has this kind of paternal solidity to it, which kind of goes along with the grounding and the protecting. So
Thank
that's
you.
a brief Mapacho moment.
Yeah. What do you think, Marc? Should we start kind of rounding things up here? You're on mute, Marc. You're muted still.
No, my
Can't hear you. There-
cat crashed on me and I had to change everything for whatever reason. Anyways, the joys of technology. When it's great, it's great. When it's not, it's not. But yeah, if we don't have any questions from our studio audience, it would be a great time to start wrapping it up. Stephen, you bet.
Well, I just see if any of our three wonderful panelists have any concluding comments they want to make.
Absolutely.
And remember, do stick around for a couple of minutes after we turn off the recording, please. Anyone? Mary, you look like you're about ready to speak.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it's been such a and thanks so much for the Mapacho and Icaros explanation. I love learning from others, and thank you all for this beautiful time together. Yeah, something that's been really important to me is thinking really about collective care, and that's what I'd like to share more about during our conference. And why I bring that up is so often we talk about these medicines and sometimes forget, right, the privilege of time, resources, support systems that are often needed to really have an experience or a medicine experience, but also to have the spaciousness to integrate it into our lives. And so something I, often talk about with my clients is what are your support systems look like as you're doing this work, whether it's medicine or other paths to altered states. And so I just wanted to bring that forward, but also to acknowledge as we think about, here we're talking about a lot of the medicines that are in the jungle, but as we think about in the future, like, MDMA or psilocybin that is really going to be embedded in the medical industrial complex, and who are the gatekeepers, and how is, racism and classism still really heavily involved in who gets care and who doesn't care, and what insurance you have and who doesn't have insurance. And so I think that's just a really important part when we think about how, how these medicines will be integrated. And so I kind of invite us to really imagine, like, well, what can care look like outside these systems? And what are ways that our communities can connect? Just as I mentioned earlier, just the small ways that we can continue to nourish our relationships with our direct neighbors, but also spiritual communities, so that we can build this ongoing care, provide mutual aid and resources, and really be like an extensive family, so that if someone needs to receive care and in a medical office, that's an option, but also that there's care outside of that. And I just really like to highlight that piece, because we have so much of our care has been outsourced. And so really thinking about the ways that we can share our wisdom and our knowledge and our resources, not only for every day, but thinking about the ways in which these medicines continue to be integrated in our society, and so that we can help and support each other. So that we are not experiencing this alone, and that we're not going to the jungle, but not having anybody to really understand and hold that space for us. So I will just leave us with that. Thank you so much for this time together.
Thank you for your insight, Mary. Anya, unas palabras más?
I just really deeply appreciated this conversation with all of you, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. And from what Mary just shared, what comes to my mind and to my heart is the healing power of community as such an important complement to the plant medicines. And that is so deeply ingrained in indigenous cultures because it's part of the culture. But in Western society, we're very individualized societies. And I do believe that through the plant medicine ceremonies, we are learning again how to heal each other in community, and what an opportunity there is. And also, just like reflecting on this conversation here, we are still crafting this really young field of the resurgence of psychedelic science in the West. In indigenous cultures, those are 1,000-year-old traditions. They already know how to hold the space. Here in our Western culture, we need to learn how to integrate this. And I appreciate this opportunity that we all have, sharing our reflections and growing in there as a human community into this potential that the plants or the psychedelic open up for us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any closing words, Suikene?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for having me on this. I've actually never done a panel discussion before, so it's a new experience. And one thing I always like to remind people is that I work with plant medicine. Ayahuasca, it's a very, people are excited about ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a plant. It's something people go through this process to extract a very potent part of a plant. But the plant, it is a plant. It is just a plant. It is just a part of nature. And in a certain sense, it's a very concentrated part of nature, and which is what allows it to be so healing. But yeah, there is a lot of healing in nature, And I mean, I live in a city, like a lot of people live in urban lives, fly around in giant Coke cans across the country all the time. So maybe I'm being a little bit of a hypocrite, but just a reminder of how much healing there is in nature. And as you guys were saying, in community. And the psychedelics and plant medicine, they're just a very, very like acutely concentrated, applied version of nature. And to remind us to connect with nature,
Beautiful.
connect with community.
Well, thank you for that plug for Coke.
What's the joke? Like airplanes.
I know. If only we had them as a sponsor. No, just kidding. Yeah.
Well, hey, just remember, coca leaf was in Coke at one point. So at some point in its inception, it was some form of a plant medicine, right?
There you go.
So,
there you go. There you go.
Yeah, it
just
was
saying.
indeed.
Just saying.
Yeah, it was Coca-Cola.
Coca.
That's where it came from.
Yeah.
Which I think is always interesting, because you look at the history of plant medicines, from cannabis and different tinctures and coca and things of that nature, before it all become illegal. It was part of remedies that people were using. And I happen to think that nature's our best pharmacy. And with what, you've all shared today, I think that, it certainly validates that perspective. And I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your day before you come up to Vancouver to share your wisdom, to connect, to, speak with our community as well. So I just want to thank you all for being here as well. Thank you.
I have one more thing I got to say. I forgot. I was thinking about this today. As I was saying earlier, I believe that the real role of plants is plus harmonize and come into sanity. And that plants and other rituals are at the essence of us knowing ourselves, of us being in harmony with ourselves. And one way to understand the world that we live in is that it's so inverted in its values that psychedelics and plant medicine are forbidden to us. They are made illegal. And I was like, that is like I was like, that is one way. It's like a metric for the madness that we are living in. That thing that most readily returns us to ourselves, most readily returns us to nature, most readily returns us to community, is a scheduled felonious substance. That's where we are. And that's also the solution, like inverting that and bringing these things back into the reverence and the respect that I mean, deserve isn't even the right word, that only makes sense for plants and for us, for ourselves, for the human race, for the whole planet, the whole planet. So that was my other thought.
Yes. Well, you just opened a goodie box of possibilities there. I guess we're going to have to go for another hour, right, Marc?
Almost. Well, it reminds me of the conversation I always seem to have with Dennis McKenna when we speak is like, who do we think we are thinking that we can actually make nature and plants illegal? Like,
Yeah. Like I say, it's a whole other topic here.
I know,
Yeah.
before we go down that rabbit hole, anything you want to say before I wrap it up, Stephen?
No, just I'm really grateful to the three of you for joining us and sharing your understanding. And as I said earlier, I mean, I hope a lot of people. Oh, and on that note, I hope you three will share this video when Marc sends you the links for it, because it's been very user friendly, as it were, guidance that could help a lot of people, I think. And I just also, I'll just like to say also, both, at least two of you, maybe all of you mentioned community. And that's a big part of our conference. We keep everybody in one room, lock them in for 3 days. And so
Not
we
literally.
we really do go through a journey, but we don't have like it's called, some people would call that a one-track conference. We deliberately do not have breakout rooms and so on, because we really do go through a shared journey over 3 days, and the connections that people make because they have this time to get to see the same people. No criticism on the MAP style psychedelic science conference, but there's like 12,000 people there. You're only going to meet a couple of people, and maybe you'll see one person and you may not see them again for the next 5 days. Whereas at our conference, people make connections, and it's been really valuable for a lot of people. So we are building community. I like to call our conference an empowerment hub. So thank you so much. And we'll talk to you on the other side for a minute.
Awesome. Well, I just want to wrap up and say, anybody watching this program today, if you are interested in coming to the conference, we also believe that, in terms of the context of what we're talking about, commodification, capitalization, and all that crazy stuff, we do our best to keep our prices low, because we always believe that non-accessible is not acceptable. And that's something we coined, I carry from our good friends, Tom Hatzis and Eden Woodruff. So anyways, we do our best. And if you're watching this, we also like to think, if you're interested and you think there's something there for you, bring a friend. And I always say, don't tell Stephen, but if you use SPMC 241, you'll actually get a 2-for-1 ticket, because we want to encourage you to bring a friend who may be interested in the same thing. As well as we also want to thank our sponsors, specifically right now, Unify, who shares our program out to their community of, 2.3 million people, I think. And a big shout out to Michael Kraus, who is in the back end running our production and our tech for our program. Always thank Michael for the work he does and the support in that nature. And of course, community. It's all about community. And I just want to thank everybody here again today. Stephen, thank you very much for always being available to make these programs happen. And until then, and if you're interested, come to the conference November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And if you can't make it in person, we do a unique hybrid program. So this is kind of an example of what we do. We can bring people in from all over the world. We stream it into Zoom so that you can connect, see, and chat with people in a community type forum. And if your cameras are on, we put you up in the main hall so our speakers can actually see you coming in from other parts of the world, and you can engage in real-time Q&A. So we're doing a bunch of different things so we can bring community together, so we can make sure that there's dialogue. You don't have to be in Vancouver. You can watch it anywhere in the world from the comfort of your own home. So thank you very much, everyone. Until next time, my name is Marc Caron with my friend Stephen Gray, and we want to thank our guests, Mary Sanders, Anja, and Swee, if I got that right, Swee Kenny. So thank you very much, everyone. And until next time, take care of each other.